Dear listeners, welcome to another episode of South Asia Chaat, brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. As Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is soon to complete his second year in office, we thought it timely to discuss in today's episode continuity and change under the Imran Khan-led government. My name is John Vaughter, a research associate at ISAS, and today I have with me my colleague Iqbal Singh Sevea, visiting research associate professor, who will help to give us a preliminary progress report regarding what is different and what remains the same in Pakistan. Welcome, Professor Sevea.
Thank you for having me, John. My pleasure.
To begin, in Imran Khan's 2018 election campaign, he made promises about creating a Naya Pakistan and used language of transforming the country into a new Medina, Medina being one of the holiest cities in Islam, or to create an Islamic welfare state. Has he been able to fulfill his initial promises?
The promise of creating a Naya Pakistan was central to Imran Khan's electoral rhetoric. And by this, the implication was that upon assuming power, he would give shape to a polity which was free of corruption, had a revived economy, had a welfare state, working welfare state structure, had a vibrant form of citizen participation and accountability. Now, this is a tough task for anybody to pull off. But if you ask me if he's been able to bring in or usher in any radical revolutionary change in Pakistan, my answer would be no. The promise of Naya Pakistan, as espoused by many of his supporters or envisioned by many of his supporters and promised by Imran Khan himself, has somewhat fallen prey or been delayed due to broader structural issues, financial constraints, and Imran Khan's own compromising with the military itself. And now the new COVID-19 pandemic scenario that Pakistan is grappling with.
You mentioned the financial constraints, and this is something which we'll be returning to later, as I see from your answer that the economy and much of what Imran Khan has inherited has affected the degree of change that he's been able to implement. But outside of the economy, another aspect that you touched upon was certain compromises that he has made with the military. And it appears that Khan has a very different relationship with the Pakistan military establishment than former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Khan has sometimes been criticized for his close relationship with the military, where in other contexts it seemed to give him some credibility in international negotiations. So one of the questions I have is that as the international climate is witnessing a seeming surge in the power of the state, and within Pakistan itself, the China-Pakistan economic corridor is gaining a lot of traction with regards to the potential economic change it can create. I'm wondering, is there a new type of reconfigured relationship between the military and the civilian sector?
To be sure, Imran Khan and his party, the PTI, had huge amounts of support among the populace of Pakistan when they stood for elections as well. However, there have been repeated accusations and allegations of the military having aided him and his party coming to power. And there's a lot of documentation on this that had been done. There was military censorship of news coverage of the electoral campaign. Certain members from certain people standing for election from other parties were restrained from their normal activities, etc. So you have, but it's important to know there was popular support for him and his party as well. But it's also equally important to know the military is alleged to have played a role in ensuring his victory as well. And there's no surprise that he's often called the selected prime minister. Now, the one point I'd like to just point out before I take the question head on is that he's not that different from Nawaz Sharif as well. There have been other political leaders selected by the military as well. Nawaz Sharif's problems with the military started a little later into his tenure. Initially, the military did see him as as somebody they could work with, and he saw himself as somebody who could pitch himself as being liked by the military as well. So in this sense, there's no radical shift in political structures in Pakistan as well. Now, Imran Khan's closeness to the military is attested to by statements by himself and the military as well. They've often said they are on the same page. They've often been photographed together, senior military officials. General Qamar Bajwa, the army chief of Pakistan, speaks to business leaders in Pakistan as well. And it's worth noting that General Bajwa's term as the army chief was actually extended in August 2019 by Imran Khan's government. Prior to this, only one army chief had his term extended by a civilian government. So this is a significant point in itself. And this led to a tussle between the government and the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court suspended the extension of the army chief. The government then threw its weight behind the military, the army chief, by passing a number of bills in the Pakistan National Assembly to ensure his extension as well. Now, this reflects the relationship between the two individuals, but also the two institutions, the elected officials and the military themselves as well. Now, in addition to this, military leaders are also playing important roles in other aspects of society and economy as well. Retired Lieutenant General Asim Bajwa has been appointed the chairman of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Authority. Now, this is a very important role, and you alluded to the significance of CPEC, or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as well. Asim Bajwa, the retired military Lieutenant General, is also now the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Information and Broadcasting. So this, I don't think I need to go into too much of details to point out what that alludes to as well. At the same time, it's also important to note that Imran Khan's government has also incorporated a number of non-elected advisors into the governmental structure as well. Most notably, the advisor on finance is Abdul Hafiz Sheikh, who's not an elected official. So it's not just the military, but it's also technocrats who've been brought into the governance structure as well.
And it's difficult to talk about the China-Pakistan economic corridor without also considering the broader geopolitics in the region. And last year was a very significant year for geopolitics in South Asia, particularly the relationship between India and Pakistan. India conducted the Balakot airstrikes last February, crossing the line of control. And it also revised Kashmir's constitutional status. At the time, some analysts had argued that by changing Jammu and Kashmir's status, it would possibly open up space for Pakistan to rethink its relationship with India vis-a-vis its national identity or foreign policy. Since then, do you see this happening at all?
I would say not quite. I would again maybe add a little bit to the question itself and point out that it wasn't in Pakistan. It's if we step away from the governments, but to look at the level of the media, at the level of popular discussion, religious movements as well, and commentators. The issue is not just about Balakot or the redrawing of the maps, but also the subsequent clampdown in what is described in Pakistan as India-occupied Kashmir. Now, so there's an added dimension now that feeds this perception, or the idea that there is an issue that's there are individuals in Kashmir that are being repressed. There's a clampdown on it for months on end. Now, if you look at newspapers in Pakistan, this is something that's covered extensively. Subsequent to that, there have been policies in India that, arguably are seen to be anti-Muslim and anti-minorities in India. And all this has I would say, fed the issue of Kashmir, brought the issue of Kashmir back to the forefront. Now, when Balakot happened, both when India struck Pakistani territory and Pakistan struck Indian territory. Imran Khan's rhetoric was very mature. He handled the scenario, I thought, commendably. But subsequent issues that have happened have led to him re-adopting the Kashmir discourse. And this clampdown, the anti-CAA protests, the actions against the anti-CAA protesters in Pakistan, in India, etc., have all kind of rolled into a wider issue of Islamophobia and repression of Muslims globally. And Imran Khan has in his recent speeches and in international forums, has presented himself as a spokesman against Islamophobia. And all these things have fed in there as well. But on the other hand, when you have an economic crisis, it's not the time maybe you want to reshape identity in a country as well. You know, politicians look for things that can distract, but also help with legitimacy as well. And this has happened at a time in which he's increasingly confronted by the fact that the promise of Naya Pakistan is not playing out, or hasn't played out yet.
Yeah, you alluded to Imran Khan's speeches. I remember at the UN General Assembly last September, he talked about this global Islamophobia, but money laundering was also an issue that he approached. And the economic crisis in Pakistan, like you said, is very much at the forefront of how much the government is able to enact. So in some ways, going full circle toward the constraints, the structural constraints you spoke about earlier on, do you see Pakistan being able to climb its way out of its current economic difficulties?
When you ask me, can it solve its economic problems? My answer is an immediate answer. My immediate answer is certainly hope so. But I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I could provide a definitive answer in that sense. What I would say is I'll break the question up into different aspects of it. There is the inherited issue of the balance of payment crisis. But there have also been mixed signals coming out of the government on various issues. Imran Khan's government. There have also been mishandling of various aspects. So just to highlight two, inflation has risen to a 12-year high. Particularly important in Pakistan is the issue of food inflation, which has gone up to about approximately 15%. And this is not just due to a lack of agricultural produce. This is also linked to the issue of mismanagement of food distribution networks. And this is an issue that, in terms of coming back to your point about if this will affect his popularity, this definitely will take a hit. The other point that I'd like to point out that is actually, if we step away from the COVID-19 scenario for a second, another issue that is incredibly significant in Pakistan is the agricultural crisis. One, the food distribution networks, which did not work as well as they should have, which led to a crisis in wheat prices recently and also sugar prices as well. But now Pakistan is confronting a massive plague of locusts, just like India is about to experience in full scale as well. Now this is estimated to have wiped out billions of dollars from the agricultural sector. Now, this is a sector that contributes 20% to the GDP of Pakistan, and about 65% of Pakistan is hired in or works in the agricultural sector. The Imran Khan government, unfortunately, is being blamed for not having preempted the locust crisis. Now, it's a different issue whether they could have done anything about it, but a lot of people in the agricultural sector, a lot of farmers in Punjab, Sindh, etc., are feeling that pesticides should have been sprayed earlier. Now, we can go into a discussion of whether that would have worked, etc. But he is taking a hit in these sectors, especially. And now with COVID-19, the scenario is even tougher. It's estimated that, or rather I would say IMF has estimated that Pakistan's economy will shrink by 1.5%. Now, one of the things that Imran Khan's government has sought to do was to raise revenue generation. Now, with a slowing economy, with an agricultural crisis at hand, with the COVID-19 pandemic and a very low tax base, I'm hard pressed to see how that revenue generation is going to take place. And again, this is not a problem which is unique to Pakistan or Imran Khan's government as well. And this kind of comes back to your first point about the Medinan state, the Medinan welfare state. And this leads to the contradiction. The desire is there. I must add, the desire on the part of Imran Khan and the PTI government is there to develop these welfare structures. They've shown they can do it in KPK to a limited extent, of course. But they have revenue constraints, they have financial constraints, structural constraints. And this is why I find it hard to answer this question about what's going to happen in the economic sector going forward. I wish there was some clarity from the Pakistan government on this as well.
Well, thank you, Professor Sevea, for joining us today and sharing your insights. As you said, it seems like the desire for transformation is there. There are structural constraints, but nowadays there are also many structural variables. So we will be back with more analyses on contemporary South Asia, particularly Pakistan. So stay tuned to South Asia Chat. Thank you.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.